What is next for the Minnesota Vikings? They had a very slow week 1 of free agency, and it was something that we already knew. And then Rob Brzezinski, after the signing of Kyler Murray, ended up confirming just that. We're going to talk about what are the next steps for the Vikings. We're going to talk about, hey, these are the updated needs for the Minnesota Vikings. And we're going to talk about a potential Jonathan Grenard trade. Finish off with a nice little 7-round Vikings mock draft. Welcome to the Real Forno Show.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Real Forno Show, your go-to spot for everything Minnesota Vikings. Hosted by the one and only Tyler Forness, the beat writer and NFL draft guru for A to Z Sports. Bringing you the sharpest breakdowns, film study, analytics, draft scouting, and unfiltered takes on your beloved Vikings. Whether he's diving into the latest roster moves, pre-game outlooks, post-game reactions, or hunting for the next big prospect in SKOL search, he's got you covered from every angle. So buckle up, Vikings fans. Let's get into it.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Real Forno Show. I'm your host, Tyler Forness. With me, as always, is producer Dave up in the top left corner. And we are going to have a conversation about your Minnesota Vikings and kind of what that ends up looking like. Because last week, they only made 2 moves. They only made 2 outside moves. And that was to bring in Kyler Murray. And then also they signed James Pierre, the cornerback. We already talked about those last week. The Kyler Murray post-signing video is one of our better ones to date. Go watch it, like, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications. You'll get my full-fledged thoughts on the Vikings signing Kyler Murray and kind of what it means for JJ McCarthy. And we'll update some of those thoughts here today. We'll talk about a Jonathan Grenard trade, why that has not happened yet from everything that I'm hearing and what that could mean moving forward for the Vikings. And we'll finish off with a 7-round mock draft because we want to talk about the updated needs for this team, which we're going to start off with, and then how that's going to manifest in the upcoming draft. I just threw a poll question in the chat, which I recommend you guys go check out and vote, because it's a really interesting discussion point with what is the number one need for this team. And I'm going to be honest, my number one need for this team is going to be a little different than everybody else's because I think it's linebacker. And we'll just start there. So need is such an interesting term, and how you look at it is going to be different from person to person. So the way I am looking at need is coming from a longer term approach. We're not just talking about 2026. We're talking about beyond. And right now, the only linebacker that is committed to the Vikings past 2026 is Eric Wilson. Yes, Eric Wilson is the only linebacker on this team. We could get Blake Cashman back. We could maybe extend Ivan Pace Jr. That one's probably less likely than a Cashman extension. But there is no plan at linebacker that we have seen come to fruition. So to me, that's the top need, because as much as linebacker might not be deemed a premium position, it is a very premium position, especially in this defense. You take a look at all the great defenses out there, they have top linebacker play. And the Vikings have really good linebacker play, and they did last year with Cashman and Eric Wilson. But they have to continue that with how this defense is structured, because it is so important to have those linebackers as successful blitzers, good run defenders, capable in coverage and in space. Having those elements is key to a Brian Flores defense. Not having anybody past the 2026 season is a problem, and you have to address that quickly. Now, that could come in the form of a Blake Cashman extension, which Alec Lewis hinted at apparently on KFan. I've not been able to listen to that transcript yet. And if they end up extending Cashman, well, now you have your 2 starting linebackers for at least the next 2 years. And if you have that, you can feel a lot more comfortable about that position and then move on to other big needs. Right now, so far in the poll in the chat, defensive tackle is the number 1 vote from you guys. And it's completely understandable. But linebacker does not have anything past 2026 other than Eric Wilson. And you guys know how I feel about Eric Wilson. Good football player, but can he duplicate that year over year? Can he find a way to make it better? Can he find a way to just keep it up? Because look, he was 32 years old. And having a breakout in your age 32 season, not exactly great, right? So is he going to be able to duplicate that in 2026? I don't know. But the contract details were released on Over the Cap. And quite frankly, look, I don't love the total amount of money, but it's always about structure. And I have to take a little bit of an L. The structure is pretty dang good. It's basically a 2-year deal. We're just over $12.5 million, 12.9 to be exact. And having that is a huge win for the Vikings, because now you can cut him after those 2 seasons and it's only 2.03 million dead. That's nothing. And it gives you a little bit more continuity and flexibility and certainty at the position. And quite frankly, look, if he ends up stinking, it was a risk that's arguably worth taking. And they chose to make that happen. And I'm not going to fault them for it. But you still need to add to the position. You need to have a future at the position. And if that future you've determined is going to be Eric Wilson and Blake Cashman, okay. But then at least it's certain that that is your future. And right now they don't have a future, which is why I'm making it priority number 1. You need to address the position. It doesn't have to be high-priced guys. It does not have to be a first-round pick. But you have to get certainty there. And that, to me, needs to be the number 1 priority. Now, for number 2, it's defensive tackle. You cut Jonathan Allen, you cut Javon Hargrave, who are going to give you around a $12 million cap credit in the year 2027. That money does not hit this year. That money is going to hit next year, because Jonathan Allen is a post-June 1st cut. He had $8 million guaranteed. So they're not even going to get his $11.2 million off the books for 2026 until June 2nd. Javon Hargrave had $4 million fully guaranteed. Those players are going to make in cash, and this is very important. They're going to make in cash around enough to cover that $12 million. So Hargrave signed a 2-year, $23 million deal. He's going to make more than $4 million in cash this year, which means the Vikings get to offset it with a write-off, also known as a cap credit, in the year 2027. Jonathan Allen signed a 2-year deal worth up to $28 million. The details of that one aren't out yet, but the way that the Bengals do contracts, it's almost a guarantee that there's going to be at least $8 million in cash for Jonathan Allen next year, which means the Vikings are going to receive an $8 million cap credit for him. So it makes the salary cap situation just a little bit better next year. That's a big deal. But because of their departure, we have a giant hole on the starting lineup of that defensive tackle. Now, look, you can tell me that, oh, we're just going to have Levi Drake Rodriguez and Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins step in. Are you sure you want those guys playing 700-800 snaps and they're going to be very impactful and effective for that many snaps? I'm not convinced of that. I don't think any of us should be convinced that they're going to be ready for those positions. Personally, I think Levi Drake Rodriguez is a massive hit as a 7th-round pick. And when you talk about hits, it's all about where you take them. And being that you got a rotational defensive tackle in round 7 is a big hit. Now, if that guy becomes a starter long-term, that's an even bigger hit. Still, I don't know if he's more than a rotational player. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with being a rotational player. But to be a starter is a different level. Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins had some flashes, but he only came out of the draft as an interior guy weighing 275, and he has some strength deficiencies he has to work on. And you really can't put him at edge because his hips are way too tight and stiff to be able to maneuver and bend around the arc. So when you talk about those elements, you basically have 2 starters open next to Jalen Redmond. I think Ingram-Dawkins and Levi Drake Rodriguez, Elijah Williams, and my guy Jalen Hutchings from the CFL, don't forget about him. There's some interesting players to rotate in. But who's going to be a starter? If you are going to start Ingram-Dawkins and Levi Drake Rodriguez, to me, that's a pretty big red flag. I don't think either one of those guys are ready for that kind of role. Now, if you have to start one of them, I think you can mitigate it. But starting both of them is a huge problem for me. And that's why defensive tackle is a priority need. Now, you don't have to spend a lot to get a quality starting defensive tackle. Go get Jonathan Bullard back for $3 million. Now, he's not going to give you anything in the pass rush, which if you read my article from earlier today at ADZsports.com, which I will pull up for you here in a second and drop into the chat, I think that the run defense issues were severely overstated last year. I don't think there were these big run defense issues, especially when you look at the stats from an overall perspective. They faced the second most rushing attempts last year, and the EPA and success rate were down year over year, just from a rushing perspective. But they became one of the best pass defenses in the league, and they allowed 1.1 less yards per carry, despite facing nearly 150 more carries year over year, and their yards per play average dropped from 5.3 to 4.7. The shift in how they handled the defensive line was a smart one. But unfortunately, the players that they picked weren't necessarily that. And that's why we're talking about replacing 2 defensive tackles and wanting to really focus on that position. It's a really, really tough one from an overall kind of perspective, because you want to have really good football players. And trading away Harrison Phillips was getting rid of one of your really good football players. But stylistically, and what those results bore out, they were right in trading away Harrison Phillips. Where they were wrong is prioritizing Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave and giving them the contracts they did. I will defend the Jonathan Allen move. I think that was a smart idea. And quite frankly, I don't think he should have been cut. I think you should have tried to give him a pay cut. But based on what the market showed, he was right to say no, because he left and he got a big deal from the Bengals. So that's fine. Now, Hargrave ended up getting a sizable deal from the Packers too, so even he was right. But that contract to me was less defensible than Allen, because I think Allen was a good player last year. Was he worth $17 million average annual value? No. What I do think he was worth was about 12 to 13, which you have to pay a premium in free agency. You're overpaying a little bit. Okay, that's fine. It balances out, right? Overall, I think the idea to focus more against the pass was the right one, but the personnel moves that they made ended up being incorrect. And I think you can have both of those things. They don't have to be mutually exclusive. And when the Vikings go into the draft, I hope that they still continue to prioritize the pass rush, because you can use the pass rush to help stop the run. And when you have linebackers like Blake Cashman, who are really good at fixing things, you can take those chances. You can take those risks of, hey, we're going to be really aggressive. We're going to slant defensive tackles. We're going to shoot gaps. And Blake Cashman has the ability to save you on the back end and be an eraser, a recovery guy. That's a great asset to have. And it really feeds into the idea that the Vikings want to be super, super aggressive. Now, the third position, I think a lot of people put safety here. To me, it's cornerback, because I think safety position, assuming Harrison Smith comes back, which to my knowledge he's going to, I think safety's fine for this year, where you can always find veteran safety help. And I think that's the path that Brian Flores is going to prefer. And that's a position he also prefers with cornerback, because of how much that they do on the back end with disguises, with their complex alignments, and ask players like Josh Metellus to line up in the A gap and then play a deep third. It's psychotic behavior. And I mean that in every complimentary way possible. I think he's going to want football IQ. He's going to want experience. That alone is going to take the Vikings to another level. And if you end up bringing in veterans at those positions, we talked a little bit about some safety guys. I thought maybe they'd look at a Nick Cross or a Brian Cook to come in and be that veteran stability factor. But they have not been able to get it done. I was told that they were in on a couple of other safeties, but they weren't able to finalize those deals due to outside factors, one of which we'll talk about in a little bit. I think you could still get a really good high-end safety in free agency next year, and you don't have to spend a high pick. Or you can use a second, third round pick to get a safety in a very deep safety draft. You don't have to draft Dylan Thieneman from Oregon. And you guys know I'm not the biggest Thieneman fan, but he is surging in mock drafts. It's crazy how often people are just sending him. And I think some of it just has to do with, well, he's a white safety and Harrison Smith is also a white safety. I think there is some of that at play. Because personally, I don't think Thieneman is a first-round talent. I don't care what the athletic testing said. I didn't see that on tape. And to me, that matters a little more than just testing really well. When a guy tests really well, I always go back and look at it this way. Did the tape show it? And if the tape didn't show it, why? Why didn't the tape show it? And for me, I haven't been able to quite answer that with Thieneman, but my answer right now is not that, oh, he's just that athletic. Because when I watch him in coverage, he is not very smooth in those transitions, but he was incredibly smooth at the combine. So it's a real conundrum for me in trying to identify, was I right or was I wrong? Because the data right now is not matching up. But right now, the mock draft analyst community, the high profile ones, which you guys know with my mock draft tracker, that's who I focus on. Like, I focus on the real experts and not just anybody who does mock draft. They are saying that Thieneman is going to be with the Minnesota Vikings. They are projecting that. And to me, it's like, well, maybe there's a chance I'm just wrong and I won't see it, which I do admit, like, that's a real thing. Mock drafting and drafting in itself is a complete inexact science. So I think the Vikings would prefer to go the veteran route with safety and then maybe take a guy day 2, day 3 and develop them. But we'll see. We'll see what that looks like. I think cornerback is the number 3 need on this team. And it's interesting talking about cornerback because this is a pressure-based defense. This is a defense that wants to get pressure on you, and then the coverage it'll make their lives a lot easier. And if you get pressure, those cornerbacks don't have to cover that long, which means you don't have to have elite players back there. You have a really good one in Byron Murphy, and then you have a couple of dart throws on inexpensive contracts in James Pierre and Isaiah Rodgers. After that, you have nothing. I do think that you need to address that nothing. I think it'll be an older prospect, or if not age, it'll be older in experience. Or a guy like Chris Johnson, who's a 4th-year senior coming out of San Diego State, has over 2,000 snaps in college. Over 1,000 of those are in coverage. That, to me, is a big signal that, hey, I may not have the age, but I got the experience. I have played a lot of football, and I think Flores is going to want a player like that. I think cornerback needs to be somewhat of a priority early on in the draft. Just take somebody in the first 4 or 5 picks. That's all I'm asking. I'm not even asking for a ton. Just take somebody early. And then my number 5 need is running back, because I think the future of the position is one that needs to be addressed. I think your running back 3 being Xavier Scott this year is fine. Aaron Jones is probably not returning next year. I think they need to find somebody who can be the future. And in year 1, they're running back 3. They don't have to do much. Yeah, you can get them in, and if they thrive, get them more reps. Just keep going. I think one of the big reasons, there are 2 big reasons why I think Kevin O'Connell doesn't run the football more. Because when they run the football, it's good. And I think that's a misconception among Vikings fans that, oh, the Vikings just don't have a good run game. It's not that they don't have a good run game. It's they don't have a consistent run game. It is not called consistently game to game. It is not called consistently drive to drive. That is the bigger issue. Not that the running game isn't good. And when it comes to O'Connell, some of that just happens to be, we're down. We need to score points. And the easiest way to score points and the more effective way to score points is throwing the ball. Your analytics will tell you that. Your efficiency metrics will tell you that. And quite frankly, if you're down 14 in the third quarter, it's going to skew way more toward the pass. Well, guess what? They ran the ball significantly more in 2024. Why, Dave? They were up. They had big leads on teams, so they ran the ball more. In 2025, they didn't have as many leads. They were down a lot. They threw the ball a lot more. Sometimes it's that simple. Sometimes it's canning, where you change the play at the line of scrimmage because, hey, we're going to call a run, but if you see this, can out of it and throw it. That happened a lot last year. The other part of it is the reality that Kevin O'Connell just is not willing to stay with the run as much as he should. That is a big factor as well. Now, how much of that is going to be he just doesn't trust his running backs? Listen, Aaron Jones is very good, but would you trust him? Nobody can trust him to stay healthy. When he's healthy, he's very good. But if you can't trust him to stay healthy, are you going to trust to give him 20 carries a game? No. Jordan Mason, he's not really a threat in the pass game in the same way Jones is. Are you going to want to stick him out there for 40, 50, 60 plays a game? Probably not. So there are a lot of complicated elements to the run game question, and we'll probably have a deeper conversation about it after the draft. But in an overall level, Dave, I think those are our biggest needs. You can talk about tight end. I don't think center is a dire need like most people do. I think they have two guys who should compete for the job, and I think bringing in a rookie would be a smart move. But I don't think it's like, oh my God, we have a disaster zone at center. It is Dakota Dozier level. No. They have two capable enough centers who are on the lower end of the starting players in the league. Now, do you want to have like your center ranked 25th to 32nd? No. But I also don't think we're in this desperation mode where we have to prioritize center no matter what. You have to get a center. You have to get a center. This isn't like 2011 when they were so desperate for a quarterback. They took Christian Ponder like a round and a half before he should have went at 11th overall. Center is okay. Bring in another guy to compete and let him duke it out. And may the best center win. And I am not going to be convinced that they need to massively upgrade that position. And it has to be the priority. Because one, that player doesn't exist. It didn't Linderbaum. I'm sorry, were you going to pay Linderbaum $27 million a year? If you genuinely were going to pay Linderbaum $27 million a year and break the pay scale of the position by 50%, please let me know in the comments, because that I would have crucified the Vikings if they chose to do that. Absolutely crucified them. It's a tough conversation, but overall with center, Blake Brandel and Michael Juergens, the Michael Juergens we saw at the end of the year specifically, they're fine. You want better, but you have to, for lack of a better term, cut corners because you just don't have cap space. And there is not a first-round caliber center unless you're taking Spencer Fano, who's a right tackle in college, and making him a center convert. There just isn't a first-round player, and there might not even be a second-round player in this draft. A lot of third-round talents at center. It's just one of those things where you have two guys who've shown to be capable enough, and especially Brandel with an entire offseason to work on snapping, which was his biggest issue, by the way. Guess what? He can get better because he had never played center before this past year. So we can talk about tight end with TJ Hawkinson. I think that is a need that can be addressed. I would want to address it at some point during the draft, but I'm always worried about drafting tight end high because, as Dave says all the time, you're usually drafting tight end for their next team. I don't necessarily love the idea of taking a tight end and all of a sudden, hey, they're gone in 4 years and then they thrive with their next team. I don't love that. Because technically that's what TJ Hawkinson was. So those are my big needs. We're going to talk more. I've been starting to really dive into the center class. I'm going to be honest, guys. I don't love Logan Jones out of Iowa. He's like Garrett Bradbury, but all the bad parts of Bradbury are worse. That doesn't sound like a guy that we want to play center. Jake Slaughter, to me, is just boring. And Dave, you're a former offensive lineman. Boring is good. He doesn't really have issues, but he also doesn't really win like in a dominant fashion. He's just kind of there, and he doesn't let guys past him. And to me, I think that guy can be like a 10-year starter. He'll never make a Pro Bowl. He'll allow like 25 pressures, something like that a year, but he'll just be solid. And quite frankly, that sounds pretty good. I'll get into more guys. Sam Hecht, Connor Liu, who is coming off a torn ACL, by the way. That is a factor. There's going to be some really interesting prospects to talk about with this class, and we'll do a show on centers at some point. But before we kind of move on, Dave, I kind of just rambled a lot over the past 25 minutes that this show has been going on. Where are you at with some of these needs for the Minnesota Vikings?
The only one you didn't seem to cover was wide receiver 3. I don't think Ty Felton is quite there yet. And we need depth in that room.
Mm-hmm. I do think it's a need, but how big of a need is it? Is it bigger than any of the ones I mentioned? And I think that's where that
argument about
comes
production. If you go on a pure production, but then there's the whole idea of a punter. Are we going to draft a punter? Which I do not advocate drafting any kicker or punter. Should get them in free agency. But there's one particular punter. I don't remember where he's from. Georgia, something like that. Alabama.
Yeah.
The left-footed,
I think,
Aussie kicker.
I think it's Thorson. There's a Tommy Doman from Florida. He's interesting, but I don't like draftable is so weird.
Yes.
But I will say this about drafting specialists. The Vikings have drafted 3 All-Pro kickers since 2012.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I get the idea of never draft a specialist, but at the end of the day, if you're drafting an All-Pro in round 6, who cares? Take the All-Pro. Like, even if that guy lasts 4 years and then he just ends up starting to stink, you got an All-Pro season out of a 6th-round pick. I'm not going to argue that. A 6th-round pick making All-Pro is a massive hit. I don't care if it's a specialist. If you got that kind of production, like 6th-round picks get tossed aside like they're nothing. The 6th, 7th-round pick swaps, and then they get cut regularly. Who cares? If you use it on a specialist and they hit, like, I just don't understand why that matters so much. Why it's a bad thing to take a kicker. If that kicker hits, who cares? It doesn't matter. Like, you're oftentimes taking the best kicker in a draft in the 6th round. Will Reichard was an All-Pro. Like, to me, that's a massive hit. That's a great use of a 6th-round pick versus, we're going to take Walter Rouse, who's probably going to get cut after this year because he's just not very good. I don't know about you, Dave, but I'm team take good players. And if that means an All-Pro kicker, so be it. That's fine by me.
Mm-hmm. And as Dixon Maya says, specialists matter, and they do matter.
Be very careful saying that, Dave. Just think about it, and
I know.
Okay,
Chris Cluey. Mm-hmm.
Good old Chris Cluey. So let's talk a little bit about a couple news things, and then we're gonna go on to the mock draft to finish the show. Thank you guys so much for joining. We got 104 of you in here today. We're here every Monday and Thursday night, 6:05 Central Time, plus even more. The second Jonathan Grenard potentially gets traded, we're going to go live, which is why we always say, please like, subscribe, and ring the bell for those notifications, because we'll go live at the drop of a hat when news happens. And a like, subscribing, and ringing the bell, guess what? They're all free.
Mm-hmm.
And that's great. They're all free. But if you want to contribute a little bit, become a member of the YouTube channel, join the Discord, you'll get access to the Rumor Mill channel, which is everything I hear about Jonathan Grenard. There's been a lot of stuff about him recently. Who the Vikings have missed out on in free agency due to outside factors, and how much the Vikings like certain players in the building. You're going to get a lot of that in the Rumor Mill channel. The only thing we ask is, don't share it with everybody because you're paying to get access. They're not. Don't give it away for free. But let's talk about Grenard, because I've been hearing a lot about a Grenard trade. And as I said, go check out the Rumor Mill channel, join the YouTube channel to member, link it to Discord, and bada bing. Discord link is in the show notes, by the way. Grenard, I've heard a lot of things about Grenard, and it's an ever-changing landscape. But the one thing that I'm willing to share is this. My understanding is that there are multiple deals that the Vikings are comfortable taking. It's all about Jonathan Grenard agreeing to a contract extension. And look, if I were the Vikings, I'd just give him the contract extension, right? Because he's only making $19 million average annual value that's outside the top 20. I think Grenard is a fringe top 10 edge rusher in the NFL. And you should give him fringe top 10 money. I would give him a 2-year extension worth $34 million. That number sounds like a lot, but you have to remember 2 things. Micah Parsons is getting $47 million a year, average annual value. Myles Garrett is getting 40. TJ Watt's getting 41. The 10th highest paid edge rusher is Brian Burns at $28.2 million. And 11th is where we're settling in at, and that's Nick Bonito. So with the $19 million average annual value he has on the last 2 years of his deal, then you give him $34 million on a 2-year extension. That encompasses average annual value to $26.5 million. Yeah, I think he's worth that. I think he's completely worth that. He's shown that he's such a massive asset to your organization. He is the engine behind this defense. They're not willing to give him that deal. And it sounds like maybe other teams aren't really willing to make that deal either. But I would. Why? Because Grenard's that good. I love Grenard. I think he's a great football player. And overall, I just think it would be an abomination to trade him. I will absolutely rage if they don't get at least a high second and then some. Like, some of the offers I've heard have been just atrocious. You got to pay your players. Now, you don't pay everybody. You don't pay Jalen Nailor $11.66 million. Good for him for getting that money. We love players getting paid. But the Vikings didn't have the flexibility to pay Jalen Nailor that kind of money. It's smart to let him walk. Now, when you have a guy who's playing at an elite level, and don't let 3.5 sacks fool you. Jonathan Grenard last year was playing at an elite level. What he did was so important in maximizing the rest of that defensive line, in maximizing pressure. And instead of Grenard and Van Ginkel getting all the sacks and pressures last year, guess what? It leveled out across the board because now you don't have to design your pressure packages only for Grenard and Van Ginkel to get open and get to the quarterback. You have Jalen Redmond. You have Javon Hargrave. You had Jonathan Allen. You had Eric Wilson and Blake Cashman. You had Dallas Turner, who took a big step. All of those guys saw their edge, like their pressures, go up. And because their pressures went up, Grenard's went down. But that's okay. Because his presence was allowing those guys to succeed. Eric Wilson was so good because he followed Grenard often and was in his hip pocket and maximized what attention Grenard brought to him. It's not always on the stat sheet. And I think Grenard, even from a leadership standpoint, he's been great. You don't trade a guy like that. And if you do, you get a first-round pick for him. You absolutely get a first-round pick for him. On an overall scale, Dave, I don't know if it'll happen. I'd hate it. I'd absolutely hate it. But that's the reality of where we're at.
What I'm hearing is other teams are worried about his low tackle rate and his injury rate, if you want to call it that. How often he's injured. Misses time.
I'm going to be honest, I'm not that worried about the injury. Last year, he would have played through that injury if the Vikings were still eligible for the playoffs. And that's the one thing I think people are overlooking because he had a torn labrum. He easily could have played through it, but he chose not to play through it because the Vikings were out. Josh Vitellis would have played through his injury too. I believe his was also a shoulder. Guess what? If you are out of the playoffs, there's no sense in playing through it. Like, just get it healthy. Get ready for next year. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. And the finishing was a little weird this year, but a lot of his pressures ended, even the missed sacks, like other guys cleaned it up. And the misses weren't exactly like terrible. They were frustrating for sure. But we're not talking about Grenard like completely whiffing. He would be guys who just muscle out. And I think that's a 1-year anomaly. If you're really concerned about that long term, I think you're missing the forest for the trees a little bit. Plus, we have to remember some of that came because of the shoulder injury.
Yeah, but
pressure matters more.
Teams that are looking to acquire him are going to use that in the negotiation.
I know, but actually being concerned about it, I think, is a bunch of hooey. I think if you want to use it in negotiation, go ahead. But I don't think it's something with merit. I don't think it's something where you actually are concerned about it because, quite frankly, he was a great finisher in 2024. Like, I don't think there's any real hardcore evidence that says he's a terrible finisher. Now, you use anything you can in a negotiation, even if you think it's a bunch of crap, because you're trying to get the upper hand. You're trying to get the value. One last thing before we go into the mock draft, because I do think it's noteworthy. Albert Breer had a report today about Kyler Murray, saying the Vikings discussed a second year with Kyler Murray's contract. I'm sorry. I really think the JJ McCarthy era is done in Minnesota. I thought that last week. I said it last week. I wrote about it. That dropped Friday morning for A to Z Sports. I think it's just done. JJ McCarthy is not going to be the long-term option for the Minnesota Vikings. And we're getting more and more evidence that he's just not the guy. Is that his fault? We don't know how much each party is culpable, but I'll say this. They both are. Both the Vikings and JJ McCarthy are culpable to some extent. But the way these actions have been taken, the more we hear, the more we listen to Kevin O'Connell, Rob Brzezinski, and the organization talk, I firmly believe they're done with JJ McCarthy. Will that be the right decision? We'll know in a few years. But I always point to the second half of that quote of organizations fail young quarterbacks, for young quarterbacks fail organizations, where O'Connell talks about sometimes you need to move on and you need a fresh start. And you can approach things with a clearer mind. And sometimes that is the recipe for fixing you. That's what happened with Baker Mayfield. That's what happened with Geno Smith. That's what happened with Sam Darnold. And maybe JJ McCarthy needs that too. And that's not to say McCarthy or the Vikings are explicitly at fault. We don't know how much each party is going to be at fault. But it didn't work. And cutting bait too early sometimes is better than cutting bait too late. Because it's not just about winning football games. It's about keeping jobs. It's about trying to set the future of the franchise up for success. And if you have too many negative years, maybe Justin Jefferson at some point will ask for a trade. That hasn't happened yet. There's been no indication he will or that he's even unhappy. But that has to come into your brain. That has to be at the forefront. You want to keep your superstar, your megastar wide receiver happy. And bring in a more talented quarterback who has had a lot of success in the NFL might be the recipe for that. We'll see if it works. But the Vikings right now are trending to be moving on from JJ McCarthy. And we'll see if they're right. Because nobody, not me, not producer Dave, not the Vikings, not any of you listening or watching, can say with the certainty that that McCarthy is either going to be atrocious or he's going to become the second coming of Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield. We just don't know. That level of uncertainty is a big factor in a potential decision to move on, because you can only have so much patience with where this roster is at. I wish they would have more. I wish that they would give him a little bit more runway, but McCarthy's also done it to himself by getting injured and then playing atrocious football. There's only so much that you can be like, hey, the Vikings gave him every chance to succeed. Well, to a point, they gave him a lot of chances to succeed, and he didn't. I think the McCarthy era is done, and we'll leave it at that.
Do you advocate for trading him?
I wrote about the fact that, hey, maybe he could be on the market. Trading him is an interesting conversation because there's a lot of levels to it. One, let's just go with the idea. What are you getting back? Is somebody going to pony up a day 2 pick? Because to me, that would be a starting point for wanting to make the trade. Because it's not just about trading the players so they can get a fresh start. You have to get capital back. And are you willing to make the trade if you're getting less than a day 2 pick? I don't know. Probably not. History suggests that you'll probably get somewhere around a 4th. Is that enough? Because not only are you trading the player, Dave, you also have to factor in replacing the player on the roster. Who's going to replace him on the roster? Who's going to be the backup to Kyler Murray? Are you going to convince Kirk Cousins to be the backup? Then you want to have 3 quarterbacks who are capable to play. So who's going to be number 3? It's a very layered conversation that's not just about, oh, let's just get max value. you have to replace him. And if you're not getting a day 2 pick, maybe keeping him for 1 or 2 more years is a smarter move because he's on a relatively cap controlled contract. And you have to have quarterbacks who are at least capable enough to start games. Now, maybe McCarthy's not the future of the franchise anymore, but can he win you 4 games if he had to start him? I'd feel a lot more comfortable with him than I would with Sam Howell or Max Brosmer or even Carson Wentz. Like, that's the conversation we're having now. Quite frankly, you have to blow me away for me to trade him right now. That might be more of an offseason move.
Plus, you got Kyler Murray isn't known to be 100% healthy all the time.
And you know what? That's another part of it, Dave. That is another part of that conversation because Kevin O'Connell has seen it already 2 times in his stint with the Minnesota Vikings where he has had to start 3 or more quarterbacks. He doesn't want to do that again. And he's going to have enough quarterbacks to succeed. So keeping McCarthy is probably going to be what happens. But if somebody blows you away, take the deal and figure it out. You can always trade like a 6th-round pick for somebody like a Josh Dobbs, who can be a capable enough quarterback for you. Like, you got to blow me away at this point for me to really want to move McCarthy. Now, is it in the best interest for McCarthy to get traded? Yeah, I think it is. But we're not talking about what's in the best interest just for McCarthy. It's about what's in the best interest for the Vikings, too. It's a very layered, complex conversation that cannot be answered with a simple one line. I know some will just advocate for trading McCarthy because he's not getting a fair shake here. You know what? There may be some merit to that. But guess what? This isn't a JJ McCarthy move. This is a move that has to benefit the Minnesota Vikings. They're not just going to dump him because, JJ McCarthy's not getting a fair shake. Look, I'm sorry. I think he's gotten a relatively fair shake. It's his fault he missed a bunch of games. It's his fault that he stunk when he did play, for the most part. It's a complex conversation. You have to be looking at all the elements of it. That's enough on my JJ McCarthy soapbox. We're going to have a lot more of these conversations over the next few months, especially as we go into a quote-unquote camp competition, which to my understanding is going to be real. But Kyler Murray didn't come here to play competition. He came here to start a quarterback. And I think that's what's going to end up happening. But before then, we're going to do a mock draft. 7-round Vikings mock draft in a little bit of rapid fashion because it's already 6:50. Dave, if you would, play the video.
I would. Welcome to Vikings First and SKOL's Mock Draft Mondays. Who will the Vikings pick? And who's your favorite choice?
I do want to update everybody. The poll that I started at the top of the show, Vikings' biggest need after the first week of free agency. 53% of you said defensive tackle, 24% said cornerback, 15% said other, which is going to be safety, running back, tight end, center.
Quarterback.
Only 8% of you said linebacker. I'm a little disappointed, but I also understand because when we think of need, we think of more pressing. And because of where things are at with the Vikings and the linebacker position, you don't need to make a huge investment right now, which is a lot of times what you're having the conversation about what the biggest need is. So let's start here. We're going to do this in kind of rapid fire. And we're going to do this trying to be a little bit more on the predictive side. So I did a stream for A to Z Sports, which you can go find on A to Z Sports Vikings YouTube channel, where I did an entire mock draft based on what would help the Vikings in 2026. That was the only focus, helping them now. A lot of people didn't like that draft, but that's okay. These are about exercises and trying to find different paths to making a successful football team because you never know what's going to happen. You never know who's going to be the next Laramie Tunsil gas mask. So we're going to hit start. We're not going to do trades. We're just going to kind of look at the board and we're going to take good players, okay? If you don't keep Brian O'Neill. Monroe Freeling's an interesting one. You'd have to kick him over the right side, but his profile is very similar. Jermon McCoy, what's going on with that knee? I would need a little bit more clearance on what that knee is before I take him. CJ Allen's my boy. I love him. And you can go back and watch the SKOL search. I just think he's a tremendous talent. Manuel McNeil-Warren, that's a good safety. I have a day 2 grade on him. I don't love any of the safeties other than Caleb Downs. And Downs, I don't think you're getting, even with the reports that came out about him getting flagged at the combine and potentially having a degenerative ACL. That's a really tough one for me. I would want a little bit more clearance on what's going on with the medicals before anything else. Keldrick Falk is a really fascinating one because he's 6'6", 285. He doesn't have a great pass rush profile as an edge rusher, but if you kick him inside and play him as like a 5-tech, 4-eye, I think it could be really, really good because his profile is going to work a little bit more on the inside. And then if you trade a guy like Jonathan Grenard, someone like Cassius Howell, I'm out on taking Caden McDonald in round 1. I don't think there's enough of a pass rush profile to justify taking a good nose tackle. I don't think he's an elite prospect as a nose tackle. And to me, that's the differentiating factor. If he's available at 49, I'm smashing it no matter what. But not at 18. That's too rich for my blood. And if you disagree, that's fine. I think that's an interesting conversation, Dave. And that's one that we had with JP Acosta a few weeks ago, talking explicitly about defensive line values. I'm going to find it and I'm going to share it in the chat. You guys should all go check it out.
Tiedemann go on this mock already?
I will check here in a second. I'm sharing that and I'm going to pin it so everybody has an opportunity to go check it out. All right, let's see. Dylan Tiedemann. Yeah, he went 9th. What? 9th? I'm sorry. That's so high. I have Tiedemann as a 3rd-round player, a very high 3rd-round player, but I just didn't see it. And every so often, you're just not going to see prospects the way everybody else does. And I think Tiedemann's just that guy for me this year. We talked about it a little earlier. Yeah, 9th? Man, that is so rich. But it is what it is. So let's talk about building this team out from a long-term perspective. I'm going to be honest. When I take a look at all these players, the one guy that I'm kind of focusing on is Keldrick Falk. I think linebacker is the biggest position of need, but they need interior guys, and they need guys who can be versatile. And I think Falk fits that bill. So we're going to take Falk. Of course, I screwed that up. So we're going to do a new mock draft because I forgot to hit 7 rounds. So we'll just take Falk here for samey purposes. All right, 2nd round, couple interesting players. Ty Simpson at quarterback. No, I don't want Ty Simpson. I don't think he's that good. I'd take him in round 3, but he's not going to be there. He's probably going to go round 1 because teams are desperate at quarterback. Keith Abney the 2nd. This dude is so much fun. Very similar player to like Byron Murphy Jr. He's a little bit smaller. He's not 6 feet tall, but he is a really aggressive corner who's got great ball skills. And as I mentioned, JP Acosta earlier, we were talking about prospects, and he said he's just a dig eraser. He will just go and break up dig routes. Just a fun football player. Gabe Yakus, I don't know if he's the type of edge rusher the Vikings would want. AJ Halsey, more of a center fielder with ball skills. I think that would be a great complement to what we have with Josh Metellus, which is what I think you have to do. That's what I think you need to take. You need to take somebody who complements Josh Metellus. You don't want to take another Josh Metellus, which is why a guy like Caleb Downs, I don't think it's a big deal that it'd be redundant, but it'd be very redundant because he's not an over-the-top type of safety. He's a playmaker in the box. I would prefer to have somebody who's going to be better playing a deep half or a deep third. Eli Stowers, if you want more of a move tight end, hyper athlete, but he's small boy. 235, small boy. That's worrisome for me. Malachi Lawrence is a really intriguing player. If you end up trading Grenard, that's somebody I would look to target. I think he's got a profile that you can build around, and you can do a lot of the variation stuff. You can drop him into coverage, and he's a fluid enough athlete. John, we are actually not going to trade down in this draft. We're going to try and do it a little quickly. I'm going to take a cornerback here because I do think it's a bigger need than safety. Abney's my guy. I love him. I love his film. I love what he's able to do. One thing you also have to do is you have to know that there's going to be a safety moving backward. There's going to be safeties here. And we have one, Kamari Ramsey. I think he's a good football player. There's some interesting players. Sam Hecht from Kansas State, the center. I'm going to try and get to him tonight. Jake Slaughter. I like Slaughter. Kind of boring, but in a good way. Logan Jones is a no for me. I'd take that guy in round like 5, but he's probably going to go in round 3. And to me, he does not play with good leverage. Does not have any sand in his pants. He does not drive players off the football. There are just things that he does not do that worry me a lot. And I don't want that guy in round 3. I don't think that guy is going to be a player who's got a long-term relationship with an NFL team as a starting center. But if you really want one, I think if Slaughter's there at 97, I'll take him. But I'm going to go ahead and take Kamari Ramsey. This is a good football player who I think has some decent ball skills. He can also go and play in the box if you need him to. I like what he does. A forced incompletion rate of 9.7% is a pretty good number for a safety. So we're going to take that guy. We're going to pair him with Josh Metellus. And guess what? With Harrison Smith likely coming back, guess what? Not going to have to worry about him playing right away. And I think that's a nice thing to have. Now, this is going to be an interesting player to watch. Jonah Coleman, Washington Pro Day today. Only did positional drills. One of the biggest knocks on Jonah Coleman going into the process, Dave, speed. Well, you don't run. Dave, there's a reason why you're not running. You slow, boy. You slow. So, and I know
they should have GPS data in this game so they know how fast he actually is in game time conditions.
Yeah. But at the same time, that's rough, Dave. That's rough.
Mm-hmm.
That's something I'm going to keep an eye on. Kind of take a look down the line. There's Caleb Proctor's an interesting one. I'm hoping to get to some Southeast Louisiana tape. I've heard a lot of really good things about him as a pass rusher. So if you want to take a guy like him at 97 to pair with Keldrick Falk, who you got earlier, and really give 2 top 100 picks to that position, I think I'd be for it. And you know what? We're actually going to do it. We're going to take Proctor because he's more of a gap shooter. He's going to be a little bit more of the Jalen Redmond type role. And I do think you can find a nose tackle either later in the draft or in free agency because, quite frankly, those guys are easy to find. But take him, and you can then kind of work on him with the development plan. You don't have to worry about him being an immediate contributor. Hyper athlete, really good production, shined at the Senior Bowl and at the Combine. I think that's a risk I'd be worth taking. Here, 161. We've already addressed interior defensive line, cornerback, and safety. Linebacker, I wish we had one that we had taken already, but we haven't really had a good one to take, Dave, since round 1, and we picked Keldrick Falk over CJ Allen. And we're going to take a running back here. We're going to take the home run swing between Nicholas Singleton and Katrin Allen. Allen's more of your bruiser. Kind of already have that in Jordan Mason. Take the home run hitter, Nicholas Singleton. I'm going to be honest, he kind of stunk this year. But Penn State on an overall level did stink. He's a fast player. He's like a track sprinter out there, and he can do a little bit of everything. I thought this guy had a chance to go round 1 going into the year, and he was bad. So is there going to be a little bit of retribution for him? We'll see. But I like the idea of taking him in round 5. It's a good way to try and improve the spot. 195, we got our linebacker, Owen Heineke. I like this guy a lot. He was trying to go back to Oklahoma by doing one of those things where he was trying to get an extra year of eligibility. Did not work out for him. So Pat Coogan's an interesting one at center as well. Everybody knows I like.
Any relations to our former quarterback?
I'm going to be honest. I have no idea. I think Coogan's an interesting one. The former Notre Dame transfers to Indiana and won national title. I love Eli Heidenreich. If we hadn't taken Singleton in round 5, he's somebody I'd fight for. He ran 4.44 and he comes from Navy. This dude, they used him as everything. He can run a route tree. He can do fullback stuff. He can do tailback stuff, play wingback, play slot receiver. That's just a weapon. And guess what? He'll probably be an elite special teamer. But we're going to go with the linebacker, Heineke. I'd like him to get a little bit heavier, but you're taking a guy in round 6. Beggars can't be choosers. So we've got 3 picks left. I think this is a really good spot to take Parker Brailsford, the center from Alabama, because look at this number. 290. Yeah, that dude's like 275. He is light, but he's got a really good career at Alabama and Washington. He played in a lot of big-time games against a lot of big-time opponents. I'll take the risk in round 7. I don't know if I'd take it earlier, but here I love it. There's a guy that I am going to pound the table for, Eric Gentry. I will take him in every mock draft in round 7. Why? Because if you've ever watched basketball, it is Taylor Heineke's cousin. Well, we learned something new today. Eric Gentry is 6'6" and 5/8, 228 pounds. He looks like Tayshaun Prince, but he's got a 35.5-inch arm length, incredible wingspan. This is somebody that you could just stick in the middle of his own defense and let him play. He played over 100 snaps as a slot corner last year. You can play him as like a dime backer. He's light. He does not have play strength, but he has enough length to keep some blockers at bay, which helps mitigate that play strength a little bit. And he'll be an elite special teamer because you can play him like you would play a safety, but he's got length like an offensive tackle. And that's incredibly valuable. I don't know how he's going to be on defense, but it's round 7. You take special teamers in round 7 and hope they can become more. Last pick 244. Take a look. We got a center. We got a couple linebackers. We got a running back. I think this might be where we try and take a shot at a wide receiver. And Caden Wetchen from Iowa. Not exactly a ton of wide receiver production, but it's also Iowa. And he's a little shorter. But this guy's a dynamite returner. And return game is becoming more and more important in the NFL. So we're going to take him. We're going to run with it because I think it's an important position. You don't want to just take upside players at the end of drafts. You have to take guys who will be good on special teams because special teams can win or lose you football games. And he's a dynamic returner. And we got to be. I think that draft is pretty good. I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's elite. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it's the best draft we've ever done. But I do think it's good. And that is our show, Dave. I think when it comes to mock drafts, I think you're all going to find something that, hey, we should do this instead of that. We should not take this type of player. We should take a guy like Dylan Thieneman, even though I'm not a big fan of him. We didn't even have the chance to take him today. But the whole idea here is to try and find as many different opportunities and different situations for these players as humanly possible. And that's exactly what we did. We took a look at a multitude of different positions and different opportunities. And I think we ended up with a good draft.
Was that the wife texting you saying supper's ready?
No, I cooked dinner. No, it's actually my Dynasty League draft. We're drafting for draft slots. So I'll join that here in a little bit. But thank you guys so much for joining. I'm
disappointed in that draft. We didn't draft nothing but O-line and D-line. We need to do one of those.
Oh, well, I mean, we did draft 2 defensive tackles and a center.
Right, but we need to get more linemen. I like the big round bellies.
I know you do. But the one thing that I caution about that is you got to make sure that there's a spot on the roster for those guys. Or at least a theoretical spot on the roster. The later round picks, you still have to earn it. But if you take too many, they're not going to make on special teams too. Yeah, but you're not keeping offensive linemen for special teams purposes. You'll keep cornerbacks, you'll keep wide receivers, you'll keep linebackers for those reasons. But
why are you poking holes in my dream?
Because hey, this is why people come here. Honest analysis. Dave will post on Wednesday, the location of who will be king. Make sure you keep a look at that in the post section of the YouTube channel. Next week, it'll be
Should
on
be the Frustrated Chicago
Vikings.
Sports Fan channel, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Next week, it'll be on Vikings First and SKOL, and then you'll always be able to get it on audio. Real Forno Show will be back on Thursday, and there still may be a Jonathan Grenard trade show coming out, and hopefully I'll finally be right one of these days. We're going to have a SKOL search coming out this week. We'll see. But we're going to have a lot more for you here leading up to the NFL draft, including a lot more coverage, more mock drafts because we're getting closer and it's becoming a little bit more predictive. And we're going to have a lot more for you. Thank you guys so much for joining. I'm Tyler. He's Dave. SKOL Vikings, everybody.
SKOL Vikings. There we go. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell to get notifications. It helps us grow this community that we all love our Minnesota Vikings. And on behalf of Tyler Forness and myself, Dave Stefano, thank you so dearly for watching The Real Forno Show. SKOL, everyone!